Armitages Argument. Chris, your essay attempts to weave together prison anecdotes, psychological research, and political commentary into a thesis that conservatives in general, and Trump supporters in particular, exhibit lower empathy and share traits with sex offenders. You frame your story with a personal prison experience, which makes the essay more compelling to general readers. The dayroom TV imagery is vivid and memorable. Your use of research, citing a range of studies, Fazel and Danesh, 2002, Zeberjadi, 2023, Morris, 2020, Costello, 2022, to support claims about empathy differences and personality disorders is commendable. Even if selectively applied, citing neuroscience and psychology lends authority. Then you continue to try to link micro to macro. Your prison as a mirror of politics metaphor ties your anecdotes to his broader thesis about American conservatism. This and other features reveal your weaknesses in your argument. It is simply anecdotal bias. Chris, your observations about prisoners watching Trump on TV are not systematically measured data. They are anecdotal impressions projected onto an entire ideology. Chris, you are simply cherry-picking research. It is laughable that the neuroscience and psychology studies are framed in a one-sided way. For example, empathy tests are context-dependent and politically loaded, but you present them as if they are immutable truths about conservative brains. Your views are simply false equivalences. You equate Trump supporters with sex offenders by association. This is a classic guilt by association fallacy, where a minority group's behavior is used to tar millions of ordinary voters. Your overgeneralization moves from a handful of co-workers and inmates to sweeping claims about American conservatism as a personality disorder. This ignores diversity within conservative ranks. I believe you are knowingly projecting your partisan bias. You present the left's empathy as noble, even when it leads to violence, e.g. Antifa, while portraying right-wing empathy as non-existent. This reveals ideological bias rather than balanced analysis. Chris, your central claim, sex offenders love Trump, is an unfounded smear. Convicted criminals in prison represent a tiny, unrepresentative fraction of the electorate. To suggest that the behavior of sex offenders explains the psychology of 74 million Trump voters is a reckless leap. It's clowning. By the same logic, one could claim that because Marxist dictators like Castro or Mao attracted support from Western academics, the Democratic Party shares responsibility for gulags and famines. Your reasoning is disingenuous. Sir, you misuse science, and you do this knowingly. The neuroscience and psychology studies you cite are far more nuanced than you portray. Empathy tests often measure empathic concern towards strangers in experimental scenarios, not the real-world depth of sacrifice conservatives show toward family, church, and community. Conservatives consistently outgive liberals in charitable donations and volunteer hours, as documented by Arthur Brooks, Who Really Cares, 2006. The prevalence of personality disorders prevalence in prison populations has little bearing on political ideology. Crime is strongly correlated with broken homes, drug abuse, and socioeconomic conditions, not with voting Republican. Chris, you paint conservatives as uniquely cruel, but you admit that left-wing authoritarians also dehumanize and attack opponents. If empathy is the measure of moral superiority, then violent riots, cancel culture, and dehumanizing rhetoric against Christians and conservatives also reveal an empathy deficit. His attempt to excuse leftist aggression by saying it's for others is not science, but spin. Violence justified by higher empathy is still violence. Your claim that states with abortion bans have higher maternal mortality ignores, you are simply justifying murder, confounding variables such as poverty levels, healthcare access, and urban-rural divides. Correlation is not causation. By contrast, conservative policies on family stability, economic opportunity, and community support networks often produce stronger long-term outcomes than dependency on government systems. Chris, you disparage your former colleagues as abusive, broken, and authoritarian. Yet these officers serve in one of the most dangerous professions in America. Many adopt toughness out of necessity, not pathology. To generalize their struggles as proof of conservatism's dark triad traits is elitist and dismissive of people who maintain order in prisons that most academics would never set foot in. I think you know you're lying here. Conservatives do not lack empathy. They prioritize it differently. Liberals may emphasize abstract empathy for distant groups, while conservatives emphasize concrete empathy for family, neighbors, and nation. Neither is inherently superior. In fact, history shows that misplaced universal empathy can justify authoritarian overreach. Totalitarian regimes often justify tyranny in the name of the greater good. Therefore, Chris, your essay is less a scientific diagnosis than a partisan polemic disguised in psychological language. By equating Trump supporters with sex offenders, cherry-picking neuroscience studies, and romanticizing leftist violence as empathy-driven, you simply expose your evil ideological hostility more than you prove a clinical point. Conservatism is not a personality disorder. It is a political philosophy rooted in responsibility, order, tradition, and loyalty. Chris, your smear reveals the very empathy deficit you accuse us of. Your inability to see conservatives as fellow citizens rather than pathologized enemies is glaring.